Hello everyone, welcome back to another video. In this one, I'll be going over the newest class tuning patch notes coming on the 7th of February if you're on NA and the 8th if you're on EU. Just be covering what's been changed, what's been nerfed, what's been buffed, and everything in between, and obviously how I believe this will affect the meta going forward. Without with that being said, sorry, let's jump right into this one. So first off, we've got Death Knight. Frost Unleashed Frenzy duration increased to 10 seconds was 6. Cleaving Strikes Obliterate now hits 2 additional targets was 1. Frost Fever damage increased by 15%. Glacial Advanced damage increased by 20%. Frost Strike damage increased by 10%. Frost Whelp's Aid damage increased by 100%, and Frostbite damage increased by 35%. So overall, as a Frost Death Knight, you love to see these changes. Just overall buffing the sustained of this spec. It does feel like at the moment Frost is a bit. It's definitely not a bad spec. It has its place in the meta. However, it's quite niche. Um, and obviously it does kind of feel a little bit inferior to Unholy DK. So honestly, at the moment, if you're a Frost DK player, you love to see these. You love to see things getting buffed for your damage, help you do a bit more burst, a bit more sustained, and constant damage. So not too bad of a change. Up next, we've got Druid. Um, I'm not going to go over Guardian and the rest of changes. Fortunately, this does not apply to PvP, so we'll move on to Evoker. Preservation, all healing reduced by 5%. Okay, honestly, Preservation Evokers have been performing quite well. They're probably the best healer currently in this meta. So toning them down a little bit, trying to give other healers a chance to kind of catch up to par with where the bar is at. That Evoker has set. I do like it. Hunter, Beast Mastery, damage dealt by Hunter and Pet abilities increased by 5%. Marksman, damage dealt by Hunter and Pet abilities increased by 5%, and Survival, damage dealt by Hunter and Pet abilities increased by 5%. So, as a Hunter, across the board, you're receiving a 5% buff to yourself and pet damage by 5% across the board. You're very happy to see this if you're a Hunter player. Personally, though, I do believe that Hunter didn't really need too many buffs. Maybe marksmanship. I can definitely argue that with the loss of double tap. I believe they did have to compensate some way, and I believe that they did buff them in a previous patch note as well. I think they buffed rapid fire by 15% and as well as some other things. But for beast mastery and survival, I don't really because I don't really see the need for them to have more damage, as they do already have some insane pressure and momentum just by existing and pressing their buttons off GCD. So I honestly don't really agree with giving them more damage. Maybe this is more for a PvE focused buff, but when it comes to PvP, I believe these two specs weren't um they weren't performing too badly. So, but 5% may not really break the class too much, but we'll have to wait and see. Um, Monk, Mistweaver, all healing increased by 3%. Vivify healing increased by 5%. Clouded Focus now increases healing and decreases mana cost by 20%, sorry, was 15 for Enveloping Mist and Vivify. Peaceful Mending now increases the healing of Enveloping Mist and Renewing Mist by 25/50 was 15/30%. Spinning Crane Kick damage increased by 15%. Ancient Concordance increases the chance for Rising Sun Kick to reset by 5/10% was 3/6. Lesson of Doubt increases healing and damage by up to 40% was 5. So overall, a nice healing increase for Monk. Some mana decrease to the spec as well is pretty nice. A bit of damage buff to Spinning Crane Kick, and overall, I would say not a bad buff for Mistweaver. honestly, they are probably the worst healer at the moment. So I honestly agree with them showing Mistweaver a little bit of love. So not a bad change at all. Paladin, we're not going to go over this one as it's just for tanks. Priest, Holy, all healing increased by 3%. Love to see it. Holy, honestly, it does have windows of very, very, very good burst healing, but outside of that, it feels like the throughput isn't quite up to par with what the meta requires from them. So a bit of an increase on that end could help the spec pump up a little bit. Love to see it. Shaman healing surge healing increased by 10%. Chain heal healing increased by 10%. Restoration healing wave healing increased by 10%. Healing rain healing increased by 10%, and overflowing shores healing increased by 10%. So just a buff to some of Shaman's casted healing. I would say some of these are a bit more focused towards PvE. That's absolutely fine. But obviously, some of these will carry over to PvP, which honestly, any Arsham will not complain about. Um, Warlock. Inquisitor's Gaze fell barrage damage increased by 35%. Inquisitor's Gaze no longer casts Fell Blast. Summon Soulkeeper damage increased by 35%. Destruction Soulfire damage increased by 20%. Incinerate damage increased by 5%. Demonology Wild Imp damage increased by 15%. Vile Fiend damage increased by 30%. So uh, I don't think many locks play Soulfire. Um, they may they may pick it up in solo queue. Um, I'm not too sure how often, however. Um, but I would say this is a nice chunk of damage added to this spell already, as I believe it is hitting quite hard. Incinerate damage increased by 5%. Not gonna make or break the game too much, I believe. Definitely gonna help with those Destrolock damage output with their backlash procs. Demonology, though, however, the Wild Imp damage increased by 15% could see them performing a little bit well in PvE, for sure. And I think this will carry over to PvP as well, as you always have a lot of imps rolling out just by passively, not passively, but casting out those Hand of Gul'dans. Obviously, increasing the number of imps that you have at one time, maximizing the number that you have at one time is going to affect this by 15% per imp. So I can see them doing some sick, amazing damage with this spell. And Vile Fiend damage increased by 30% as well. I'm not sure how many people play the Vile Fiend over. I forgot what I believe there's a choice node for Vile Fiend, or I think it's Soul Strike. I think it's called. So I'm not too sure if people will pick the Vile Fiend now over this Soul Strike now that the damage is buffed, but we'll have to wait and see moving forward. PvP Havoc Restless Hunter talent damage bonus for next Blade Dance / Death Sweep reduced by 40% in PvP combat. I like this. Demon Hunter Burst did feel like it was still really good, even though they had tuned it down in previous patches quite a bit. So I definitely appreciate that they recognize that Demon Hunter is still a little bit of a problem, and that they're trying to tone that down. Sorry, a little bit. So that's pretty good. Moving on to Evoker. Living Flame healing increased by 30% in PvP combat. Verdant Embrace healing increased by 20% in PvP combat. Pressing Roar increases the duration of incoming Crown Control by 30%, was 20% in PvP combat. So a bit of a buff to Evokers on the Living Flame and Verdant Embrace. Making Devastation a little bit more not tanky, but adding a little bit more healing to their toolkit, which is quite nice, as they unfortunately don't really have the tools currently to live very long in this meta. They have a few buttons that they can press, but now with a little bit more of an increase to their self-healing, maybe this can add some more to their kit. And obviously the 10% increase on CC when used with in pair with Oppressing Roar is pretty good as well. So now instead of I believe, for example, if the blind was 8 seconds, it would be something like 11, and obviously toned down by 15%. So I'm thinking it goes back up to like 8 seconds, maybe 7, with this new buff. That is always quite nice for the spec. Moving on to Hunter Beast Mastery, the Stormwing Harrier's Camouflage, which is the 4-piece bonus, now increases the damage of your next kill command, by 10% in PvP. It was 20, so they've nerfed this by 10% in PvP, which is great, as unfortunately BM is at the moment quite powerful. Just having a zoo of pets on your face constantly, you can't really kite them besides rooting them, and arranging them, which is a very temporary solution, as soon as that route ends, they'll be right back on you. So it's very unavoidable damage. So I like that they've changed this. Marksmanship, rapid fire damage increased by 15% in PvP combat. Aim shot damage increased by 15% in PvP combat. Chimera shot damage increased by 30% in PvP combat. And unerring vision critical strike damage bonus effectiveness reduced by 50% in PvP combat. Now, obviously, these buffs will are most likely introduced due to the removal of double tap, and the damage is just a lot lower than what they'd want. So I believe that obviously Blizzard, seeing this, noticing this, want to help compensate that loss, which is quite a big loss for the spec, with a bit more consistent damage. So I do love to see this for the spec. Monk Mistweaver Healing Sphere PvP talent now triggers the Dispel Backlash effects from Unstable Affliction and Vampiric Touch. Healing increased by 320%. And in the note it says this change is to have more consistency among dispel effects that are intended to require careful consideration of the risks and benefits of dispelling it. I do like this, making sure that you do have to choose and make the conscious decision of whether you want to dispel something at that time or not. Because I believe if there's a spell that has that effect, it should anything that can dispel it should, because obviously without that it doesn't really make sense to have it in the game. So I do like this change. Moving on to Shadow, the Siphene PvP talent healing reduction no longer stacks with similar effects. Now this is a big one because honestly I didn't know this. I didn't know that it stacked with similar effects. So for example, you could have a Siphene out if you're playing comp like a Warrior Shadow Priest X. You could have a Siphene out and you could have a sharpened Mortal Strike or just a normal Mortal Strike, and those two effects would stack, making it very hard for the opposing team to heal and recover from that damage that you're doing in that window of time. So now that it no longer stacks, this is a huge change. I love this, just because it just helps. It helps comps with the Shadow Priest be less overpowering in PvP situations, and just helps healers to kind of recover a bit better against these types of comps. So I definitely love this one. Rogue Assassination, the Bolt Delver's Toolkit, the 4-piece bonus, bleed damage reduced by 50% in PvP combat. I love this. Wound Poison Deathmark version, healing reduction no longer stats with similar effects. Love this as well. These changes are very good for Asa. If you didn't know, when they deathmark, it would duplicate some of the effects of poisons as well as bleeds, and that would make it very difficult to heal and recover when those cooldowns are pressed. So them noticing this and nerfing this in this way just makes it so that obviously facing these comps ensures that you don't have to deal with that. And honestly, I love it. And also there was a thing where it duplicates all poisons, so mind numbing, wound poison, etc. So that them realizing that and nerfing that and tuning that down, we love to see that. Next, moving on to Shaman Restoration. Damage dealt to earthen wall totem caused by damage absorbed by pet reduced by 90%. The intent of this is intent for this adjustment is to make Earthen Totem feel more impactful as a defensive ability. Um, as we noted, it was being destroyed too quickly in scenarios where teammates have pets. I do like this, just making sure the button that Earthen Wall feels more like a button in certain situations. I do like that very much. Warlock Affliction, Unstable Affliction, backlash damage increased by 35%. Um, Note saying, after our recent changes to normalize affliction, unstable affliction's backlash damage, we're seeing it get dispelled frequently. Our intent is for dispelling UA to require careful consideration of risks and benefits, and its damage was not fulfilling that. So they're just making sure that you definitely have to consider whether dispelling UA is going to be the best thing for you in that time. And honestly, Affliction hasn't really seen too much play. It does hit quite hard at the moment. Now it's going to hit 35% harder. So we'll have to see whether or not we see a lot of players choosing to dispel that or not. I doubt with this buff that they'll want to do that moving forward. Moving on to destruction, chaos ball damage increased by 40% in PvP combat was 15, so you're getting a 25% buff on chaos ball damage in PvP, which is quite nice. Honestly, chaos ball hasn't really felt like that big damage oh shit button that it has in the past. It obviously, if the warlock casts multiple in a row, it could spell danger, but from it's not really been living up to its reputation um, when it comes to previous expansions. So I definitely like this change a lot. Uh, Moving on to warrior. Now, arms executioner's precision is now 30% effective in PvP combat, was 50. Martial prowess is now 33% effective in PvP, was 50%. Overpower damage increased by 20% in PvP combat, and slam damage increased by 40% in PvP combat. Now, I believe these changes were just to make sure that the class wasn't just all mortal strike, because if you check details after you're in a match versus an arms warrior, you would see that the top damage by a mile would be mortal strike. And I believe some of this was to address a lot of some of the spike damage that they could do with their cooldowns up. I've seen damage of up towards 178k mortal strikes among other things, and obviously them rebalancing this and kind of shifting things around, tuning it a little bit to make sure that they don't have that capability to just like just puff you off the map, so to speak, is great for the game, I do believe. So all in all, I believe these changes are very, very, very good. They I would say maybe the hunter changes don't need to be there, but that's debatable depending on what side of the fence you stand on. But in general, I believe these changes are pretty good. I honestly love that Blizzard are kind of listening to the community, and the consistency in how they're implementing these fixes and tuning these classes is absolutely fantastic. I believe if they keep this up, they will have one of the best expansions that they had in a while. So I really hope that this continues. But let me know your thoughts in the comments, what you guys agreed with, what you guys didn't agree with, what you think could have maybe changed for the better, for the worst. And yeah, I'll see you in the next one. Take care.